When people ask me what courage looks like, they expect me to say something about bravery in the face of danger, or about stepping forward when others run away. But courage, I've learned, isn't always about fighting strangers. Sometimes, it's about facing the people who stopped believing in you. My name is Samantha Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been invisible to the man who gave me my name. My father, Richard Brooks, wasn't just a man, he was a presence. The kind of man who entered a room and made everyone instinctively straighten their posture. A self-made millionaire, owner of a chain of luxury hotels, and a man who built his empire from scratch. Or so he liked to say. To the world, he was discipline, success, and authority wrapped in an expensive suit. To me, he was the man who used to kiss my forehead when I was 6 and forgot my birthday by the time I was 16. My mother left when I was 10. She couldn't take his perfectionism, his expectations, or the way he treated emotions as weaknesses. I remember the night she packed her suitcase. I sat on the stairs, clutching my teddy bear, listening to her whisper, "I can't live in a house where love feels like an exam." After she left, he didn't cry. He didn't break down. He just poured himself deeper into work and into me. But not the kind of fatherly love you hope for. More like investment management. He wanted returns. By the time I was in high school, he had mapped out my life: Harvard, MBA, join his company by 25, become a partner by 30, marry a man from one of his associates' families. The only problem was I didn't want any of it. I wanted to serve, not supervise. Protect, not perform. I wanted to do something real. When I turned 21, I dropped out of business school. I remember standing in his office that day, surrounded by marble floors, glass walls, and a skyline view that seemed to look down on me. He didn't even raise his voice. He just stared, his disappointment more lethal than any scream. "You're throwing away everything," he said quietly. "For what? A Uniform A paycheck that barely pays rent. I want to work in security." "Dad," I told him, "private protection. Maybe law enforcement someday." He laughed that low, bitter kind of laugh that doesn't come from humor but from disbelief. "You guarding doors. You were meant to own buildings, not stand outside them." And just like that, he cut me off. Financially, emotionally, completely. I spent the next decade building my own life from the ground up, the same way he always bragged about doing. Only I didn't have investors or trust funds. I had night shifts, microwaved meals, and a uniform that smelled like rain and concrete. But you know what? It was honest. When I wore that uniform, when I stood under flickering fluorescent lights, keeping watch while others slept, I felt something I never felt in his boardroom's purpose. I kept people safe. I made a difference. And somewhere deep inside, I told myself that was enough. But even then, there was a quiet ache. I couldn't silence the hope that one day, he'd see me. That one day, I'd walk into a room and he'd be proud. That day came, just not the way I imagined. It started with an invitation. A thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold. My name written in perfect cursive Ms. Samantha Brooks. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. But when I opened it, my hands went numb. It was a wedding invitation. My father was getting married again. To a woman named Elaine Moore. A 40-year-old real estate investor I'd never met. The venue, the Crystal Haven Resort. One of his own hotels. I wasn't sure why he'd invited me after 10 years of silence. Maybe to show me the life I could have had. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe because deep down, he wanted to prove I was still the disappointment he remembered. I almost threw it away. But something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the quiet, desperate need for closure. So I went. The morning of the wedding. I stood outside the resort, a sprawling estate of glass and light overlooking the ocean. Guests arrived in luxury cars. cameras flashing, laughter spilling into the air like champagne. I wasn't one of them. I wore my work uniform navy slacks, black shoes, badge clipped to my belt. Because, ironically, I wasn't there as a guest. I was there on duty. The security company I worked for had been subcontracted for event protection, and when the schedule landed on my desk, I saw the client name and froze. Brooks, Crystal Haven Resort. It felt like fate had a cruel sense of humor. When I told my supervisor, he offered to switch my shift. But I said no. I needed to face him, on my own terms. When I arrived, most of the guests didn't notice me. Security guards blend into the background invisible. Silent. But when I spotted him across the courtyard, laughing with guests in his designer tux, I swear my knees went weak. 10 years vanished in a blink. He looked older, grayer, but still unshakably proud. The kind of man who radiated control even when standing in chaos. He didn't see me at first. Not until the best man, his new stepson, pointed me out with a smirk. "Hey, isn't that your daughter?" The guard. The conversation around him went still. My father turned slowly, his eyes landing on me like a spotlight. For a second, he didn't say a word. Then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I see you've found your place," he said, his tone cutting through the air. I swallowed hard. Someone's got to keep you safe. A few people laughed polite. Uneasy laughter, the kind people use when they don't know whose side they should be on. He just nodded. "I suppose there's honor in humble work." And then he turned away. Just like that. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. More than I expected. For the rest of the afternoon, I stayed professional. I monitored the entrances, kept radio contact with my team, and made sure no unauthorized guests entered the ballroom. But every time I passed by the reception area, I caught glimpses of him toasting with guests, smiling for photos, dancing with his new bride. It was like watching a stranger live a life I was never meant to touch. As the sun dipped low over the ocean, the ceremony began. The guests gathered under an arch of white roses and crystal lanterns. Music swelled. Vows were exchanged. Applause erupted. I stood at the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a column, listening to every word like it was being carved into me. When he said, "I've never known love like this before," I almost laughed, because that was the thing about my father. He only ever loved people who made him look good. And I was his reminder that perfection could fail. After the ceremony, the guests flooded into the ballroom. The chandeliers glittered. The champagne flowed. And I took my post by the main door. My radio buzzed softly background chatter. Standard calls. Everything was smooth. Until it wasn't. It started small, a flicker of motion at the far end of the corridor. Near the service entrance, a man in a gray suit, walking too fast. Then another behind him. No name tags. No event badges. Both wearing gloves. Something felt off. I pressed the earpiece closer. Unit 3 to base. I whispered. "I've got 2 unknowns moving toward ballroom access. Possible unregistered staff." Static crackled. Then my teammate's voice. "Copy that. Sen, we're checking guest list." But I already knew. My instincts screamed at the way they moved. The way they kept glancing at each other. They weren't guests. They were casing the place. And my father, my proud, unflinching father, was inside that ballroom. The irony hit me like a wave. The daughter he dismissed was about to become the only person standing between him and disaster. The air in that hallway thickened, the kind of heavy, invisible pressure that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I'd felt it before. During midnight patrols in parking lots where shadows whispered and instincts screamed. But this was different. This was personal. The 2 men in gray suits moved closer to the ballroom, pretending to adjust their cuffs. They weren't guests. Their posture was all wrong. Guest drift. These men scanned. Their eyes swept the corridor like they were memorizing exits. I moved forward casually, radio at my lips. Heart pounding. Unit 3 to base. I murmured, keeping my tone calm. Suspicious activity confirmed. Gray suits. No IDs. Approaching ballroom east door. Request backup. Static. Then a voice crackled back. Copy that. Backup en route. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. That's how long I had to keep them from reaching a room filled with 200 unarmed people, including my father. As I drew closer, one of them looked up and noticed me. His gaze flicked over my uniform. Calculating. He smiled. That smile cold. Deliberate, confirmed everything. Evening. I said, pretending calm. You two have clearance to be here. He reached inside his jacket. My hand instinctively went to the holster on my hip. Not for a gun we weren't armed on private contracts, but for the flashlight that doubled as a steel baton. Easy, he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. He held it up, but his fingers trembled slightly. I stepped closer. That's when I saw the gun tucked beneath his jacket. Time slowed. Every muscle in my body reacted before my mind could catch up. I lunged forward, shoving him into the wall. The gun clattered to the ground, and his partner swung toward me. Shouting, we hit the floor hard. Struggling for control. He was bigger, stronger. But I'd trained for this. Years of night shifts, self-defense drills, and adrenaline kicked in. My radio flew from my belt as I elbowed him in the ribs. Hard. He groaned, but grabbed my arm and twisted. Pain shot up my shoulder. I used it, let it pull me sideways, kicking his knee out from under him. The first man dove for his weapon. I grabbed the fallen champagne tray from a nearby table and hurled it. It hit him square in the face, knocking him back. Security, I shouted, my voice breaking through the music from inside the ballroom. Call 911. Guests screamed. Chairs scraped. The chaos spread fast. Within seconds, my backup team stormed in. One of them tackled the second intruder, pinning him down. The other cuffed the first as he tried to crawl toward the service door. The gun lay between us, gleaming under the chandelier light. I kicked it away. And then silence, the kind that feels alive. My pulse roared in my ears as I caught my breath. Leaning against the wall, my shoulder throbbed. My palms were shaking. But we were alive. Everyone was alive. The ballroom doors opened, and people poured out panicked, breathless. My father was among them, his tie undone, his expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and fear. Samantha, he said, his voice low, almost hoarse. What happened? I looked at him, my throat tight. 2 armed intruders. They were heading here. It's over now. His eyes darted to the men on the floor, restrained, furious, humiliated. He blinked, his mind processing what he was seeing. Then his gaze shifted to me. My uniform was torn, my shoulder bruised, my hands trembling. For once, I didn't look like a failure. I looked like someone who acted when others froze. One of the guests whispered. She stopped them. She saved everyone. Another murmured. She tackled one of them herself. The murmurs spread like wildfire through the crowd, and suddenly, the man who'd been ashamed of me was surrounded by witnesses who had seen what his daughter could do. He took a hesitant step toward me. You risked your life. I wiped my forehead. It's my job. No, he said quietly, shaking his head. It's more than that. The police arrived minutes later, flooding the hallway with flashing lights and questions. I gave my statement, calm and precise, my voice steady, even as adrenaline crashed into exhaustion. The intruders were escorted out professional thieves, part of a high-end robbery ring. Their plan had been simple access, the hotel's vault during the wedding, using the chaos as cover. They hadn't expected resistance. When the officers left, the guests returned to the ballroom in uneasy waves. The band resumed a softer tune, the laughter thinner now. But I stayed in the hallway, leaning against the cool marble, catching my breath. My father approached slowly, hands in his pockets. He looked smaller somehow. His usual certainty cracked open. "I didn't know," he said quietly, "that you were capable of something like that." I almost laughed. That's the thing about people you underestimate. You never know what they're capable of. He looked down, then met my eyes again. "I was wrong about you." The words landed heavier than any apology. "I thought success was about power," he continued, "about control. But tonight, you showed me what strength actually looks like." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. All the years of silence, all the words we'd never said, they hung between us like ghosts. I took a deep breath. "Stay for dinner, please, just as my daughter." It was such a small thing to ask, but it broke something open inside me. I nodded. "All right, but only if I get the first dance." He laughed, not the cold, practiced one I'd grown up hearing, but something real, warm, almost boyish. When we walked back into the ballroom together, the room fell quiet. Guests turned to look not at the billionaire or his perfect bride, but at the security guard who'd saved the day. And for once, I didn't feel like a disappointment standing beside him. I felt like his equal. As the music swelled and he led me to the dance floor, I felt the weight of years slowly lift from my shoulders. He leaned closer and whispered, "You remind me of your mother." That made my chest ache, the good kind of ache. The kind that comes when something broken starts to heal. We didn't talk about business, or money, or mistakes. We just danced, two flawed people, finally learning how to meet each other in the middle. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need to prove myself. I didn't need him to see me, because he already did. Later that night, when I stood outside the hotel watching the last of the police cars leave, I caught my reflection in the glass door, tired, bruised, but strong. I realized I didn't just save a wedding that night. I saved the little girl inside me who still thought she wasn't enough. Sometimes, life gives you strange chances to heal, not with words, but with action. And maybe, just maybe, that's what courage really is.